Hello everyone, and welcome to Sunup. I'm Lyndall Stout. Deer and wild game hunters love this time of year, and some of them plan for months the different ways to attract wildlife to a certain area. One option is a food plot, but a lot more goes into creating and maintaining a food plot than you might think. Simply put, a food plot is an area of crops planted for wildlife to eat. But before you get started, experts say it's important to narrow your focus and really think about what you want to achieve. Dwayne Elmore is the OSU Extension State Wildlife Specialist.
A lot of people go into the food plot thinking that it is going to increase the carrying capacity of the land for whitetail, but often what they end up doing is just changing the distribution. Animals will associate with the food plot, but it may not actually increase the number of animals. So that being said, you need to really consider, are you willing to invest what it will cost? Because it could be several $100s per acre for a food plot.
If the answer is yes, start at the County Extension Office with a soil test and ideas on plants that will work well in your area of the state.
And you're not just going to be able to throw seed out and expect to have much attraction. You're really going to have to spend some effort and time on proper seed bed establishment, and then getting that seed to germinate, and some weed control and fertilization. And if we're in a drought period, all that could be for nothing if we don't get the precipitation. So that's a gamble you're going to have to take. One landowner who did take the gamble, Andy Wooliver, who bought this Cleveland County farm about a year ago.
I wanted to plant a warm season annual to kind of help build the nitrogen back up in the soil, and it kind of wildlife management just kind of fit what our long-term goals are with the property. The property was heavily grazed for many years. It had been leased property prior to us getting it, so all of our native species, our native grass species, were almost all but eradicated.
Andy planted a number of different varieties, and then the summer rains arrived.
All of this stuff got a really good start, and then we had a couple of dry periods there after, about June 15th or so, and it's told us a lot about how different species perform next to others, and how wildlife prefers certain species.
Andy worked closely with Cleveland County Extension educator Heath Herje.
It all kind of started with just taking soil samples to them and starting a conversation, and a year later this is where we're at.
Heath, just kind of give me an idea of what you and the landowner have done and what you've set up out here. What's the overview?
Well, initially Andy and I had worked together with soil sampling in our extension office there in Norman, and we decided that it would be something a lot of people would be interested in learning more about. We're seeing a trend in land management these days where folks are purchasing property solely for recreation in non-traditional ag farming and ranching, going more towards wildlife conservation and hunting and fishing and recreation, and that's what Andy's obviously purchased this property for. I'd worked with him a couple months on his food plots and soil recommendations, and I said, what kind of varieties do you plan to plant? And he said, well, I'd like to try some different things. And I said, well, let's just see if some seed companies will work with us, and we'll put together some plots and actually make it a public demonstration to teach people about food plots and wildlife nutrition and wildlife habitat management.
In looking out across these acres, there's quite a variety here. Let's kind of start with these soybeans. Talk about this variety and how this is organized.
Okay. Well, as we all know, that we have the new GMO crops available now around the world that are Roundup ready versus a conventional soybean. We actually incorporated a grain sorghum into this mix just to see kind of the mutualistic relationship between a legume and a grass. We were fortunate to have a good rainfall year here in Cleveland County, and so these obviously look very good, and we're very proud of the way that they look.
Okay, let's walk down the field and take a look at some of your other varieties.
Okay.
Heath, a lot of people in Oklahoma may not necessarily have seen this type of variety.
Right, and one of the things that a lot of wildlife managers are interested in are milo varieties that are more palatable and lower in tannin. And the tannic acid in the red milo that we looked at earlier is a lot higher and generally less palatable for wildlife species. This is a white milo that you see, a cream-colored grain sorghum. This mixture has cowpeas, soybeans, and it actually had a black oil Petrovic sunflower in it as well, which give you all the elements, the nutrition in the summer, and then of course your seed producing plants for fall and winter for wildlife on your property.
We've talked a lot about the plants. What kind of things have you learned about the animals out here and observing their trends and what they're interested in and what they're not interested in?
Well, that's a good question, and we actually, Andy and I, actually put up exclusion cages in every plot we planted to be able to tell what the browse pressure is both inside and out of the cage. And what we found is that deer in our lighter seeded areas, which we'll see in a moment, the deer actually use those more than the heavier planted areas like we see here behind us. And so that would be something good for landowners to keep in mind when they're planting their food plots, to always plant at the proper seeding rate. A lot of people think a little seed's good, a lot's better, and as most farmers know, that's not the case.
Okay, let's go take a look at those other areas as we kind of wind down our tour here.
Okay.
It looks like the deer really liked this spot for sure.
Well, that's right. And so what we have, and a lot of landowners can learn from this, we didn't expect to see the browse pressure here that we did until later in the season. As we got a little drier and some of these varieties of soybeans, cowpeas, and lab became a little more mature, we started to see the travel patterns on Andy's property here as they fall out of these topo features on your property and come out into these crop fields. You can see heavier utilization in these areas, and that's where a utilization cage or an exclusion cage is a great way to gauge your deer density and be able to tell if you need to harvest more does on your property.
And for landowners who are interested in setting up something like this, it's really important to do your homework.
It is. You know, basic farming practices. We have folks in every county across the state and many experts at Oklahoma State University in Stillwater that can help folks learn more about, you know, basic ag practices. And there's a lot of books available too, you know, for OSU. We've produced the Food Plots in the Southern Great Plains book that they can purchase, and Dr. Dwayne Elmore was involved in that. And that's a great resource for folks to learn about the basics of food plots and attracting wildlife to their property.
Okay, Heath Herje, our OSU Extension educator in Cleveland County, thanks so much for having us out.
Thank you.
And for a link to the book that Heath mentioned, you can just go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.